Hello and a big welcome to The Big Bark, the podcast for dog lovers brought to you by barkingmad.ie. I'm your host, Dara Burke, and together with my two canine co-hosts, Bruno and Millie, I bring you the latest news from the canine world. Each episode, we chat to people working in the canine industry, such as pet shop owners and groomers, behaviour specialists, and vets. We also chat with dog owners to find out more about what exactly makes a dog man's best friend. Today's show is part 2 of a special series on dog thefts in Ireland. We'll be chatting with our panel a bit later on, but right now, let's get the show started. Welcome everyone to The Big Bark, and thanks to our panel for joining us today. So we're chatting today about the recent increase in dog thefts in Ireland over the last few months, and we'll be taking a look at the need for legislation reform to ensure stricter penalties on the criminals who are responsible for these dog thefts. We'll also be taking a look at legislation in other countries and take a look in particular at the Animal Protection Index, which rates different countries based on their own legislation. We'll be looking at how you can keep your pets safe and prevent the heartache of losing your beloved companion to these thieves, as well as what to watch out for. To do this, we're delighted to be joined by our panel of guests. I'm thrilled to be joined by Samantha Rawson from the Canine College Dog Training School.
Hi, Dara.
Hi, Samantha. We're joined on the panel also by Sean Alston, who is working closely with TD James Brown on bringing forth a proposal to introduce an offence called the theft of the companion animal. Welcome to the show, Sharon.
Hello, nice to be here.
We're also joined by Kelly Anderson. We're hoping that we have another dog owner join us a bit later on, Christoph, who will also be offering their own advice as well as giving their reaction to what's been going on. And hopefully we get to meet our dogs also. And then later on, we're going to be looking at some of the dogs who have gone missing over the last few months, suspected of being stolen. Everyone, welcome to the show. It's great to have you all here, and thanks for taking the time to speak to the Big Bark today. So, okay, I want to start the show first of all by chatting with Samantha here for a moment. Samantha, as a dog trainer, is there anything that dog owners can be doing to protect their dogs in a training aspect, and how can dog owners get the balance right, I suppose, with their dogs by training them to be vigilant without being fearful or aggressive towards strange people?
Okay, I suppose the first thing I would say, Dara, in the current context of dogs being stolen is to keep your dogs away from the front of your house or where it is visible to passers-by. Not only from a security point of view for the dog, but from a behaviour point of view, an awful lot of dogs think they are allowed to bark and guard and bark at passers-by and make a general nuisance of themselves. And the dog only behaves this way because the owner lets it sit at the front window or lets it sit in the hall and run to the hall door when the doorbell goes. So keeping the dog to the back of the house cuts down on an awful lot of behavior problems, but also it doesn't advertise your dog to passers-by. So it's really important on loads of levels, but especially in today's climate where dogs are being stolen. So if you advertise your dog by letting it sit in the front window, it quite literally is, how much is that doggy in the window?
Very good points. And to be honest, it's well known that dogs, and it has been scientifically proven over the last few years, that dogs are able to tell a bad person. And one study reported in 2015 by the Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews states that dogs clearly read the communication between their owners and strangers. So they tend to avoid the people who they feel have mistreated their owners as well.
Well, I suppose my instinct would say that if a dog doesn't trust somebody, neither would I. If somebody walks into your house and the dog reacts badly to them, I would take the dog's instinct, because I think animals are incredibly intuitive. And no matter what we know about the person or what our conceptions are about the person. If a dog doesn't like them, I agree with the dog. I don't care who they are. They could be the Pope. If the dog doesn't like the Pope, I don't like the Pope.
I think that's fair to say from all of us. So you think a dog can sense a dangerous person?
Well, I think they can pick up on vibes, like dogs can tell when there's a thunderstorm. There are now medical detection dogs that they can sniff out cancers. So I think dogs are much more in tune with their natural instincts than we are. I think we, as a human, domesticated human species, we've lost all our natural instincts. So I think a dog is much more in tune with their natural behavior and their survival mechanism. So if a dog sees something as a threat, I would always listen to it.
Completely agree. And to be honest, I think I'd be the same myself. I can always kind of pick up, like, if my own dogs don't like a person, especially Millie, who literally likes everyone, and she doesn't like someone, there's something wrong. So it's it's definitely, I suppose, like, if your dog doesn't like someone, it's definitely a sign that they shouldn't be trusted.
And I think there's an unnatural requirement nowadays, a very unnatural pressure put on dogs to like people and to like everybody. And this term socialization is bandied around and often misused and in inappropriate situations. So it's quite natural for a dog not to like some people and not to like other dogs. We as human beings don't like every person we meet. And one of the shock for me as a dog trainer was the first time I met a dog I didn't like. I was quite shocked because I thought I loved every dog. But there are some dogs I don't like either. So why is there this unnecessary pressure for our dogs to be happy with everybody and happy in every situation and happy with life? I mean, that's unnatural. Life is full of emotional ups and downs, and animals are the same. It's impossible for us all to be happy all the time. But I think that's what society seems to expect dogs to be.
Absolutely. Some very good points there, Samantha. Thanks for that. Sharon, I'm going to come to you next, and we're going to touch a bit maybe on the animal welfare legislation that exists. We had a chat about this a while ago, and it's clearly not enough. And I know that you have been working on a few things, and chatting with TD James Brown, who's proposing a new offence called theft of the companion animal. Would you tell us a bit more about your work with James and what you've been doing?
Well, as I said, I discussed James Brown is the TD that's actually pushing this. I'm speaking to him tomorrow about the best way that we can actually pull together to support this. There are, animal welfare groups, there are lost and found groups, there are groups all over Ireland and all over the world that jumping up and down saying, why are our pets not considered in the same light as we consider them? Why are pets still viewed as typical in legal history? Your pet or your animals were actually just your property, and therefore there was no sentient being attached to that. It was somebody steals your mobile phone, naughty boy, you've stolen a phone, have a fine. Somebody steals your dog, same thing. This is where it's very hard for anything legally to be enforced against people, because they're stealing something with a property value rather than an understanding of the emotional impact of that. And it lies somewhere between, property and kidnapping. And it's very hard because there isn't, in the US, there are some states where it's in the penal code as kidnapping. If you take somebody's dog, it's like kidnapping from them. And, that sounds quite extreme, but to some people, their animals are the only thing they've got, and people joke and say, oh, it's my baby. But, I know people that their lives are completely evolved around their animals. Old people with their little company dog, assistance dogs, and just people that their animals are that other member of their family or the only other member of their family. And to just say it's like having, a plant nicked out of your garden or the phone taken out of your pocket isn't anywhere near enough, isn't a deterrent, and, has to be changed. It's just so outdated, and it relates back to where animals were thought of largely as herd animals that were property from farmers, etc. The whole movement of pets, companion animals, the value of that in people's homes has kind of not come along with the law.
Yeah, and I think it's also as well, even the laws they're not being enforced. So the animal welfare legislation, Samantha, I know we touched on this a small bit as well, since we lost Kelly there. Hopefully she'll be able to reconnect back. But we touched on this already, and like the laws, they're not being enforced. And
no, I think we can talk about laws till the cows come home or the dogs come home, literally. But there's no point in talking about laws unless they're enforced. And the big problem in Ireland across all legislation is lack of enforcement. And I think Ireland we are considered a lovely country to come and live in by foreigners because of our laid back approach. But it's our laid back approach that gets us into the mess we're in now with dog theft, because legislation isn't enforced. So, it's great that Dr. Sharon is talking about legislation and the TD James Brown is talking about legislation. That's great. But who's going to enforce it?
I think, as I say, I've got so much to talk about. I was trying to break it into little snippets. I think the key issue is the same everywhere. The enforcement is always the issue. Even where laws are stronger as a deterrent, unless you back that up with, the man hours to actually make sure that, the people are picked up and held to task over their actions, then no, the laws are pointless and futile. There's a huge amount of loopholes across the whole system, whether it's identification of animals, regulated sale of animals, animal registration. There's so many holes that it makes prosecutions really harder. So alongside change in the legal system, there needs to be change in all the processes that run alongside that. All the rescue centres need to get on board with accurate reporting, because dogs are being lost, straying, going into rescue centres, being scanned and getting no response on the CHIP database because the dog isn't on that CHIP database. So we're working on a system that links up all the CHIP databases, initially UK and Ireland. It will be all the CHIP databases in Europe. We will be handing out to all the key authorities, we're going to be handing out scanners that link directly to that system. So animals can be scanned, whether they be in the vets, whether they be in the ports, whether they be with the dog warden, wherever, and it'll instantly show if that animal has been reported missing. So again, alongside that, we're trying to bring in, whereas the site's advertising, and we know that there's large gangs involved in stealing, sadly, people's pets and selling them on as, I think it's a low risk, high gain crime. And, there are sort of things in place. There are large scale actions trying to track down the big guys, but there's also huge amounts of opportunistic theft happening that can easily be picked up by tightening up all the processes, more checks at the port, more checks at rescue centres, vets, dog wardens, etc. But that'll only work if that info is channeled through a central hub to make sure that everything links up. And so we've got that being developed at the moment, and it should be available fairly soon. And it is done on a charitable basis, so it's not something people have to pay for. It's something that we're putting out just as a vet. I'm just desperate to get something happening that helps get people's pets back to them, and prevents all the heartbreak of, either a dog being stolen and passed on and ending up in a new home, and after the 5-day law they can't reclaim the dog, or it's ended up in a rescue centre and it hasn't shown up, therefore it's been rehomed and the dog can't go back to its original owner. There's too many loopholes. If we can tighten all that up and we can change the law, then there's a much better chance of things being enforced.
Yeah, that sounds very promising, and I would wish you the best of luck with it. But I don't know, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to legislation in Ireland. I don't believe as a country that we're animal lovers. I don't think we value them enough, and that they're way down in the pecking order of priorities. So I would follow this very, very closely and really just wish you the best of luck. But I have my doubts.
Yeah, and understandably, it's not going to be an easy thing to achieve. I mean, funnily enough, if you look at animal welfare, gradings across Europe. UK comes up with a grade A, and yet they have the same issue there. And it's again, animals historically being something that were property, the law not bringing forward. The UK just tried to push forward a hugely supported change to legislation, and it didn't happen. And yet, the support over there was huge. But again, the perception needs to change, and it is the perception in the legal system, and certainly the older echelon of the legal system, who still think that animals are only relative to farming, and anything else in between. I mean, I found that as a vet, there's certainly in the cities in Ireland, pets are very much pets, but certainly in that rural culture over here in UK, very similar. Animals have a different value, and we need to make sure that the legal system and the structure there recognises the value is very different when we're talking about companion animals as pets, and as part of your home.
And do you think there's a correlation, Sharon, between the whole puppy farming, crisis in Ireland, and obviously in the UK, but much worse here, between that and now dog theft? Because dogs suddenly have a value that when I was a child, they didn't have. They were valued as a family pet, but they didn't have a monetary value. I think with progress of society, we've kind of gone backwards with animal welfare. I think it would be lovely to see where dogs don't actually have a monetary value, that they're valued as a family member and as a pet. But if they lost their monetary value, perhaps the theft would go down and the whole puppy breeding business would go down.
I mean, that's an option that's certainly being considered on other levels. If you actually take away the ability to breed and sell animals at a value, then the whole animal system becomes like an adoption system. It's incredibly hard as a huge system to approach, but it would have huge benefits, obviously. I think the issue that's been, theft doubled last year over the previous year in dog thefts. This year, there's been reports out in the papers saying it hasn't increased. I think I'm on enough pages to say I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the accurate data. It has certainly been a recent spate because the demand, stupidly, madly, through COVID, has gone through the roof. And you can't supply puppies on demand. A bitch only comes into season every 6 months, and you never know what you're going to get. So they've had to resort to going out, stealing puppies, stealing bitches, stealing any pet they can get their hands off to try and breed from them. And these animals are being sold for £2,000, £3,000 sterling in the UK. Even in Ireland, there's stupid price tags on animals, on dogs that you'd normally pay, maybe sort of £800 or £900 are being sold for £3,000. Because there's been suddenly a surge in demand, because of people at home, because of people suddenly realizing. Sorry? Oh, it's all right. I thought I heard someone. But we know that will then, conversely, that will flip back as a huge amount of increased dumping of animals as the cycle turns round. And therefore, again, accountability, traceability of these animals becomes essential, because if everybody wants them now and they're going to be dumping them over the next 6 months, a year, or even sooner, having a system that gives them traceability, that gives them accountability, means that we can follow up those people and make sure that even if it's just they get a rap on the knuckles and I'm sorry, you're not allowed to keep another dog for 5 years, at least something's being done to try and dissuade this wave of, we're a bit bored now, we're stuck at home, we're going to get a pet. We need to change the whole. There's so much that needs to be changed and addressed. It's not going to happen overnight, but there is an awful lot to do.
Ladies, thanks very much for that input there. Very valuable input from both of you there. And Kelly, I hope your connection is working there. I just want to come to you next, and I want to kind of bring this to everyone, really. We're seeing, especially on the Facebook groups, and
I think a huge problem is, though, from what I can.
Okay, it seems like Kelly, your mic is kind of giving some feedback there. We'll come back to you in a few moments here, hopefully, on this. Sorry. But okay, so I kind of want to actually, Sharon. Before we move on, I want to just discuss there. You mentioned about the figures and in the press in the last few days they haven't been increasing. But going back on a statement I actually received last week from the Garda Press Office, they're saying in the first 6 months of 2020 there has only been 3 additional incidents. So they recorded 38 incidents of dog theft in 2019 in the first 6 months and 41 in the first 6 months of this year. And I gotta say, those figures, based on what we're seeing online and what we're seeing on all the social media groups, is a pile of crap. There's no way that those figures can actually be accurate.
Again, I think it's really difficult because due to everybody's heightened reactivity at the moment, there is definitely a huge amount of maybe over-reporting, double reporting. The hype grows with the more people jump up and down and, shout about every house that's had a cable tie on it or a white dot on its wall, and everybody, the reporting and the awareness through the media and very much through social media has meant that I'd say the social media perception of it is higher than it is, but I'd say what we're being told, officially is potentially lower than it is. I'm not saying they're not reporting it, but I'm saying there are definitely there are pets that I've dealt with that have disappeared in one area, turned up a long way away, and they have just been marked down as, oh, the dog strayed and it ended up, 3 counties away in a rescue, wandering around in the streets. Well, a little old dog hasn't made that journey. So, but they'll be marked down as that dog, was lost and found. The dog wasn't potentially stolen. So I don't know. I've got meetings coming up with more groups, more working groups involved with the authorities. And I want to try and ascertain more information from that about, is it a reporting thing or is it actually the physical number? So, yeah, I think that's a tricky one to answer without having that answer at the moment, and I don't have that yet because we haven't had those working group meetings.
Okay, I just want to bring up a comment that we got in from one of our listeners there, someone watching on Facebook there. For anyone who's actually watching on Facebook or YouTube, pop a comment underneath the stream in the comment section, and we'll be happy to take a look at your comments. Jackie Finnegan, watching us live on Facebook, has said we need a whole overhaul of the welfare system. Our laws are outdated. Our animals are pets. Dog theft should be looked at as a crime, and we need to lobby our government and the lawmakers, which, Sharon, is what you're trying to do as well. And let's see what else Jack says here. We pay to get our dog's license. We need the guards and wardens to do more checks. They were in my town yesterday evening, marking wards and gates. I'm assuming she means there that the people stealing dogs were in her town. But that goes back to what you've been saying, Sharon, that hopefully with these proposals that you're working on now, hopefully that we will see a change in the law. Kelly, how is your mic working now? Can you hear us?
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Okay, perfect. Great. Kelly, I just want to ask you very quickly there. Now, we've all seen online in the My Dog Facebook group, the Irish Lost and Stolen Dog group, and other groups that are online as well. There is a huge sense of fear and anxiety there right now. And I think everyone will agree with this, that there's also a huge sense of anger. Is that what you're seeing from the Facebook groups as well? Kelly, can you hear us?
Very much so. In my opinion, anyway, it appears that, and it might sound extreme, but truthful. Yeah? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Perfect. And
tech issues are a huge issue.
You're okay.
You not hear me at all.
You're kind of break up. Kelly, we might come back to you a bit later on.
Can you hear me?
I think we'll come back to Kelly a bit later on. She's having some mic issues. I'd say it could be the connection. So I'm just going to keep Kelly's mic muted for a small while. Like I said, anyone who's listening or watching online can comment on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll be happy to take a look at our comments. But Samantha, Sharon, coming to you as well for the time being. Would you agree with the sentiment that there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger and a lot of anxiety, and a lot of it's all heightened because of all the posts that people are seeing online, on Facebook, on the various groups as well?
Yeah, I had a chat with another kind of local politician here in Kilkenny, and he brought up the point of social media and the role social media has to play in this, because we now kind of post everything about our lives. So no sooner does somebody get their little pooch or their new little companion, that they post it on Facebook, and instantly they have advertised that this beautiful animal is in their lives and on their Facebook page. So social media has, a good and bad points to bring to every situation. But I suppose an awareness of when you advertise things, you don't know who can see it. Do you know what I mean? That you've got to think that's a little bit like children, and that you don't post pictures of other people's dogs without their permission, and that you don't post pictures of your own dogs, and you certainly don't post your location, which people tend to do. But the thing that kind of bothers me is the general public's role in all of this, in that anything only has a market value if somebody's prepared to pay for it. So these dogs that are being stolen, they're obviously being stolen for a preordained market. They're literally being, stole to order, if you like. So there's got to be some kind of public responsibility in that the public are providing a market for these stolen dogs. And also by paying extortionate amounts of money to, irreputable breeders and puppy farmers and crossbreeds. Back in the day, they were mongrels. Now they're designer dogs. If you pay ridiculous amounts of money for these animals, then there's got to be some self-responsibility about putting a market value on a dog that really, unless it's a pedigree dog and it's in the show ring and it has pedigree papers to prove its ancestry, really, what is the market value of these animals? So I would question what the public's role is in this horrible dog theft situation at the moment.
I mean, I definitely would second that and agree. One of the things we've been discussing with some groups in the UK is, and we know that trafficking is going both ways. Obviously, dogs are stolen and turn up in Ireland. Dogs are stolen and turn up in the UK. UK dogs are stolen and turn up over here. So it's very much a mix mash. And trying to get a sort of a public PR perception out there isn't straightforward. Lots of groups are doing it. Lots of groups are posting advice about, a lookout when you're buying an animal. Make sure you check out the details. Make sure you check microchips are legal. The dog can't be sold without a chip. Get the chip checked, etc. But again, because there's two issues there. There's public, as you say, don't do it on Facebook, but we do know that they've got drones going around finding dogs in gardens, even if you put them in the back garden and everything. There's guys climbing over walls down back alleys into gardens and getting dogs. So, we do know that they're pretty clever at finding your animals, but don't broadcast it. But on the side of digital media allows for these dogs to be advertised somewhere a long way away from where they are, even before they even get to that area. And if you get a buyer in that area, you ship this new spaniel over there or whatever. If we can very quickly bring in this traceability and put pressure that the public perception is that if you're buying a dog and you're going to spend 2-3 grand to 200-300 quid, check its chip, because unless you've checked it's verified to that person, once that dog is found, it'll be taken away from you. It stops people just jumping in with their heart and paying a lot of money if they know that they could actually A, lose that animal, and B, lose that money, a few weeks later if the dog turns out to be stolen. But that message isn't getting across yet. I'm lucky because I run a festival and I've got a lot of contacts. We've got a big PR campaign about to go out, and we're going to push that out across Ireland, and we have other people looking at how to get that message out into the public as widespread as possible. And the trouble is, it isn't always the people on social media, that will necessarily buy these animals. So it needs to be a campaign aimed at, tell your granny, tell your uncle, if you do want to go and get a dog, let me help you. Let me help you check that animal out before you buy it, because people are being ripped off for stolen dogs. And the trouble, while there's no traceability, there's no retribution. But when the traceability comes in, these people will lose their animals. So,
okay, and how can then someone like me, Sharon, help you in this campaign? There are lots of canine professionals out there, dog groomers, people like me, dog boarding establishments. I think anybody who's professionally involved with dogs would love to get involved with this.
Absolutely, and the more people that pull together, the better we are. I'm waiting, as I said, I've got having a chat with James Brown tomorrow, and the legal team are going to look at the way that we're wording our official petition about changing the law, and B, how we actually just to check everything over for it to go out publicly. And then obviously we want everyone to pull together, because once we can get everything identified. Alongside what we're doing, we're looking to do a chip amnesty rollout, where we will be getting, for those people aren't chipped or those people whose chips aren't registered, we're looking at ways to change that, even if it's for a period of time, a short period of time in a crisis, to get registrations on the system, to get people chipped on a charitable basis, so that we actually do get far more traceability for all the animals, not just the few people that do get them chipped or keep all their details up to date. And then everybody else comes into play. If people are scanning animals, whether it's the dog warden, whether it's a groomer, anyone, if the dog's animal details come up unregistered, then it's just a little nudge. You've bought that puppy, it's registered to the breeder still. There's so much awareness and information that needs to go out into the public. I've not been surprised, because as a vet, I see it all the time, but I'm still amazed by the public's perception. And I spoke to a guy the other day and I said, have you tried putting his chip into other tracing searches? And he said, it doesn't matter. I've reported it to my chip company and he's reported stolen. He's going to show up anywhere he's scanned as stolen. And I'm like, sadly, he's not, because it's not all linked up. If people are aware of the flaws of the system, and then people will pull together to start patching these holes in the system. So what we want to do is before we make the big PR campaign to make people aware and just shout from the treetops, all these things are wrong, and scaremonger people, we want to go, right, all these things are issues, but this is what we propose to resolve that, to provide a solution for that. And that way, I think we actually, rather than creating a hype that creates panic and worry, we create awareness that then directs everybody's passion in this heightened time into getting behind Force for Change.
Great. And what do you think then the penalty would be if somebody was convicted or found guilty of dog theft or dog napping? What kind of penalty is being proposed?
At the moment, as I say, I want to wait until we've had the legal discussions. If we go in with a pipe dream, it won't happen. We have to make sure that what we are aiming for is realistic and also enforceable. Long term, with this new charity we're setting up, one of our key initial aims was to actually put more wardens out there. Because there isn't enough people on the ground, there isn't enough checking of animals, there isn't enough checking of welfare issues, let alone checking microchips on lost or found animals. So there is a big gap there, and there isn't money in the system to fill that gap. But in our long-term plan of opening some new centres, we will have more wardens working through from the charity alongside ISPCA inspectors and alongside the dog wardens to make everyone's life easier and to try and fill some of the holes. That's not going to happen overnight, but you have to take this in stages, and you have to make sure that you put everything in place that one step leads into the next step, and you don't just go running, I want to fix the whole world in one go. It's not going to happen. But accountability, until we've got the legal confirmation of what's realistic. There are maximum sentences, but there's very little on the minimum. and the minimum is always seems to be what's applied. So I think that's where the concentration needs to be.
Okay. Dara, you seem to be muted.
Dara, you're muted. No, you're muted.
My God, sorry about that. Okay, I think I muted myself there because like this is actually the first podcast I've done out. Like I think we've done 13 or 14 so far, and it's the first time I haven't actually talked so much. So keep doing it. That's good. But look, what I want to have a look at here is the Animal Protection Index, which I'm just going to bring up on screen just here now. And what I find very interesting about this here is that if you see it here, I have my screen shared here to the right, and what you'll notice is that Ireland itself does not actually take part in the Animal Protection Index. Like we're not graded, we're not rated at all, which is like for what we're meant to be a first world country, and we're meant to be a country that loves animals. Is it not quite strange that like we're not rated or we have no rating at all? Like when you look at other countries here, like you look at Austria, you look at New Zealand, you look at Switzerland. Now I don't know if these ratings are actually up to date right now. But United Kingdom, like they're all A and B ratings, and like Germany, for example, protects animals. They actually amended our constitution in 2002 to give animals like protection by the state, and Austria consider animals to have the same, I suppose, same rights as humans, like the same value of life as humans. So what is it like that we can do better in Ireland, apart from like what you said there yourself, Sharon, the different changes that need to be made in regulations? But like, how far are we away from being the likes of the UK or the likes of Austria, the likes of Germany? How far away are we from being where they are?
Well, I don't know, Sharon, what you think about this as a vet, but I think a country that has their breeding establishments legislation 2010 that talks about 300 breeding bitches in one establishment. I don't know how a country like Ireland, who has that kind of legislation, can be regarded as an animal-loving country. It's just not physically possible to look after that amount of dogs. And I know loads of puppy farmers are one-man operations or one-woman operations. And, you know, I personally own 8 dogs, and sometimes there aren't enough hours in the day to look after the 8 of them. So I don't know how anybody can look after 20, 100, 200 breeding bitches. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. So I think we need to look at that.
It is it's totally ridiculous and totally unfeasible and totally a huge welfare issue and totally concerning that these puppy farmers do work with other professionals, including the veterinary industry, that, you know, and still manage to seem to have very low standards. Maybe again, the whole enforcement issue is very strong here, but we've just seen, you know, very publicly the news that you know, at least one of the very bad sites is on its way out. But you know, there are plenty more, and it is a supply chain fed business. And if you tighten up the regulations on the supply chain, as in our legislation that we're looking to change isn't just changing the penalty, is to change the Microchip Act. And if everyone has to be microchipped and registered before they're sold, officially registered, the accountability is much tighter. It then actually purely, truly records how many puppies you're breeding, how many dogs you've got registered, and it's much easier then for the system to monitor and reduce their activities. You know, these big puppy farms are all linked to large gangs who are, you know, selling puppies abroad, and you know, the chain is a big business. It's a question of making sure that it's resolved in the right way, because we'd love to think that, you know, somebody does a crime and, you know, the Garda or the police should storm in there and say, you've got a stolen dog and, you know, this is your punishment, and you go to court and you get the punishment and da-da. When it's complicated, you know, crime rings and whatever, it's a lot more complicated than that, and it involves multiple, you know, authorities all trying to make sure they get on top of this. Evidently they are in some cases, but there is a lot of work to go. And the public, again, the public perception and the public information has improved over the last few years, and social media's got a big hand to play in that. People are far more aware now of the situation of puppy farming. And as long as we can tighten the chain of, accountability, these puppies can't go out and then go out as if, oh, this is a poor little rescued puppy. Can you just give me an adoption fee of 500 quid through my slightly dodgy rescue I've set up in my back garden? Because it's just another way of keeping the ring going. Genuine public are going, oh, poor little puppy, it looks so poorly, I better take it on, and find out it's got parvo and it dies in 3 days' time. So, the PR of the public has to be done effectively. The understanding of the best ways to approach it has to be done effectively. And you've got as much to learn by looking at what's been done and hasn't worked to formulate your plans of, well, you know what, maybe we could try this and maybe we could try that. And that's kind of like what we're doing with the working groups at the moment.
Well, was there legislation introduced in Britain in the last few months, Sharon, about advertising pups on kind of, free pages and all that? Is there, I'm not familiar with it, but I know there was legislation to kind of counteract puppy farming in the UK.
Wasn't that, sorry to go across there, wasn't that the law that's known as Lucy's Law?
Is it Lucy's Law? Yeah.
Lucy's Law. Yeah. Lucy's Law. There's several laws. There's Lucy's Law. Hopefully coming into play is Van's Law. There's lots of laws that are coming about through the public actually finding out what's going on, which is a huge step forward, and public strength to support things, which is a huge step forward. Now, the trouble is, it seems to be, and again, another conversation I'm having with the legals this week, there is a very fine line of accountability in the adverts, and the adverts are still legally, the bias is towards that the person advertising the animal is accountable and not the site carrying the advert. However, excuse me, the new laws say this needs to change and it needs to be enforced. It's not being enforced. If we can get the advertising platforms to buy into the fact that the system will be in place, that they can link up their chip details and it will just run through and run back. It's not a database, it'll be an information highway, that we've got these details, this guy's put in this chip number on whatever site, and it's registered to this address, and it'll come up, bing, not that address, or no, this is a cat, not a Cavalier King Charles puppy, then that advert isn't allowed to run. Now, if it's far better for them as a PR exercise to get on board with this as an option than to refuse it and say we're still going to stand by our rights, that it's the we're going to put the onus back on the advertiser is responsible. So more than one way to crack a nut. There's legislation. If negotiation doesn't work, we have to push for legislation to come in with the hammer and crack the nut that way.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to start just wrapping up here. Just coming towards the end of the show there now. So before I kind of finish up here, I just want to give a quick mention and actually a pretty big shout out. Last week, Waterford Animal Welfare were involved in the assistance with Gardaí of recovering 6 stolen dogs from a van. One of those dogs was actually, it was on the way, I believe, to the ferry. And one of those dogs was only after being stolen, was reunited with its owner like literally a few hours later. There was another incident in Limerick a few weeks ago where there was 2 men stopped on the Dublin Road by guards from Castleconnell Garda Station, and they came into the Garda Station afterwards with all this fake documentation. But really, when you see this happening, when they say investigations are ongoing, but you have stolen dogs in your possession. Why is the file not being sent to the DPP? Why is there actually not being taken on the spot if these dogs are stolen?
I think there's 2 answers from what I've been able to gather. One is, sadly, a slight apathy to this situation. And as much as anything, I found some guards I've spoken to really frustrated that their systems don't link up unless it goes into the serious crime system. You know, and I've seen on a page where there's a dog in Cork that's been found and a dog in a Garda station reported in Limerick, and you know, they only get to be linked up through social media pages of people sharing pictures. So again, working with the guards, they'll feed into this system. Again, it's an information highway, it's not a database, but we will be feeding in a daily report, lost and found, lost and found, lost and found, and it will be much easier for their systems to pick up where there's, you know, duplication, where there's matches. I think the second thing is, if the suspect or the potential theft might be linked to the organised gangs, it gets passed to another department. And then it goes quiet and it doesn't necessarily go away. But obviously what is then happening about that isn't public knowledge. So, you know, and you know, that has to be that way. And you know, that's a very sensible approach. So,
yeah. And I suppose there's a few other cases I just want to mention here. Like I think everyone knows by now the case of Topsy and Turvey. Everyone knows Turvey has made a home. Topsy is still missing. So if there's any other viewers in the UK or around Ireland who spotted anything suspicious, spotted a dog that looks like Turvey. Turvey is a spaniel, Springer Spaniel, I believe. And if anyone has seen
Golden Cocker, Topsy. I'd have a picture of her to hand. She's a golden cocker spaniel. She's not a young dog, and she's normally got quite sort of a lot of hair on her head, but obviously they'll clip that off. They dye them, they spray them, they make them look very different, they give them funny haircuts. They'll do whatever they can to disguise the dog.
And let's see, Lisa Davitt was in contact with me. Her dog Jack, a little Jack Russell, a very elderly Jack Russell, was stolen 7 weeks ago, still hasn't made a home, so hopefully someone has seen something. And the final one, Karina, who was on our show with us last week, she didn't actually mention this last week, and I had wished she had mentioned it, but her dog is actually missing since January, since the 21st of January, a black German Shepherd mix. He was stolen from their home up in County Louth. So hopefully, again, like things like this, even social media, putting the word out there might help to reunite these dogs with owners. And okay.
Just to say, Dara, I know criminals will always find a way, but just to say to people never to leave their dogs tied up anywhere. You know, you'll see people kind of running into the shop to get a pint of milk and tie the dog up outside. And I have a big issue with people leaving dogs in cars. Now, obviously, in summer that's a welfare issue, but again, if your dog is sitting in the back seat of your car and you're sitting in a coffee shop for an hour, again, really, really dangerous thing to do.
Yeah, even like all they need is a few minutes.
Yeah, and kids walking dogs, quite a few attempts. Old ladies and kids that they'll hang around the parks. They'll even get their kids to hang around in the parks, looking for opportunities where a kid is with a dog, or maybe an older or frailer person is with a dog. And even if that dog's on the lead, they'll go and snatch them. They've had people have leads cut out of their, luckily the leads sliced with knives, not the hand, but, they'll take pretty drastic measures in some cases. So, you don't want to stop people walking their dogs, but you just want to say, maybe if your 10-year-old normally takes your Jack Russell down the park when he meets his mates, maybe just for now, don't do it or go with him. That's the sort of advice we need to be getting out there. Just be that bit more mindful. It's not going to happen to everyone. When you take the amount of hundreds of thousands of pet dogs there are, these numbers are still technically as a percentage very small. But just think how you'd feel if that was your dog, that was your baby that disappeared. You know how heartbroken, and you only have to look on the pages, see how many heartbroken people there are out there looking for dogs, as you say, a week ago, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, in a lot of cases, even a few years ago. But, animals have been reunited 6 years later, luckily, always because they're chipped. So still can't emphasize enough, microchip, update your registration details. If your dog isn't, or you're not sure what database they're on, you don't know how to update your details, go to EuroPet.net, which is, you can put your chip number in there. And if your pet's chipped with one of those databases that use EuroPet.net, then it'll tell you who to go back to update your details. If you don't know if you can't get hold of them, say it's today, it's a bank holiday, you can go into Scanner Angel, and Scanner Angel doesn't link to Ireland at the moment, but it links to UK. It will be linking to Ireland hopefully soon as part of our project. You register your details there, and anybody that use one of their chip scanners across the UK it'll show up if that dog's scanned. So those are 2 websites to go to, EuroPetNet and Scanner Angel. Register your details on Scanner Angel. Even if you have never registered the chip, but you've lost your dog and you know its chip number, go there, put it in, because if that dog is scanned anywhere in the UK by a Halo scanner, and there are thousands of those out there, and they'll soon be out all over Ireland too, that chip number will go bing, bing, your dog. And even if the person doesn't notice it or doesn't record it or hasn't got the time to go away and check it, the information feeds back into the database and goes back to the chip implanter. This dog has been scanned here or here, and then that tightens up the whole chain, and that's what we need to see happening.
Great.
Absolutely. And okay, so that's all we have time for today. Listen, ladies, Samantha from the Canaan College Dog Training School and Dr. Sharon Alson, the vet who's doing so much work in trying to reform animal legislation in Ireland. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Big Bark. Also, I thanks Kelly for joining us today. Sadly, Kelly had to bow out because her connection just was giving some troubles. But we'll be back next week with our new panel. We're going to be meeting a new dog treat making business from Dublin. They've just recently launched in Ireland, and we're going to be chatting to some of this year's entrants in the Nose of Tralee competition. Obviously, chatting to the human owners and not the dogs, although that wouldn't be too bad either. And we also have Kieran from Muppets Ireland back on with her suit. Kieran was on about 6 months ago to talk about the launch of Muppets' new website, muppetsireland.ie. Until then, don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/BarkingMad Ireland. On Twitter and Instagram, our handle is BarkingMad_IE. And we'll be on TikTok at some stage later this month. That seems to be where everyone's going these days. And
Except Trump, he's not going to TikTok.
Except Trump. No, he won't let you win. And we're on BarkingMad.ie and the BigBark.ie online, where you can hear this episode in full, along with all past episodes of The Big Bark. As always, stay safe and have a Barking Mad week, and thanks to all for joining us today.